Just answering questions with waptek. I'm going to go into a long explanation at the end of the video, hopefully. Let's get this done as fast as possible. I can at least respect your stance on liberty. I thought from the way you talked in the other videos, you are pro-government regulation. I must have misunderstood some things. No, you don't. I'm totally in favor of government regulation. I'm totally against it. Neither of those answers is correct. When it comes to certain things, we do need to have some form of government regulation, and unfortunately, someone's got to be the bastard, and the federal government is a better version of it. Each individual state making rules kind of works better or worse, depending on what you're doing. But when it comes to something that is regularly turned into a case of whack-a-mole, where you're trying to track down who did what to who and crossed what border, having the federal government regulate things works better. I don't have any interest in dealing with snake oil salesmen literally selling gasoline or, in some cases, kerosene as a miracle cure and getting away with it. And they're currently doing that. I also don't want to deal with food companies selling almost the same thing being used for baby formula. And that was a big corporation that had FDA approval and then got inspected and found out you've included basically something as bad as snake oil. So while the system doesn't work, being all for or all against government doing anything of any kind on principle is not a smart idea. I'm a very practical person about this, and yeah. So, to wit, my stance on firearms. The government has made rules that say we can get away with doing a bunch of things if we just do it ourselves and don't involve a company. And we don't involve money, because their excuse is transit of property for money. So if you avoid the mark of the beast, the tax stamp, you're good. I'm cool with that. I'm not cool with the ATF being a de facto lawmaking body when it's not legally supposed to do that. But I am in favor of, yes, the government's allowed to say you can't have a machine gun. They can. And giveth and take away, we are allowed, as the population that's being ruled, to say, oh no, you didn't. I'm still not in favor of machine guns. I think they're garbage. I think they're a waste of time. And I don't want them to be available at all. But what we have now is they're available. People just have to spend $200 every time they sell it and inform the government who owns it, and they're still around. And legally speaking, you can still make a machine gun because laws have changed since then. You just have to spend $200 on a tax stamp. Coincidentally, it's the same tax if I want to make an all-metal flare gun. That's dumb. We need to change the laws. But yeah, I don't want machine guns out there. But they're already there, so I don't see that this is really going to be that bad. Anyway, let's move on. And criminals always pay their taxes and follow the laws. Let's move on. On generators, the load always changes. I wonder how they get around that. Sounds like a generator with the carburetor that I'm going to be discussing in a few minutes would work great for an electric car, possibly one that has a battery to act as a capacitor so the load on the generator doesn't change drastically. How do they get around the load change? The majority of the time, electrical equipment has a steady state current or wattage requirement. And the way it gets around it is almost all generators detect the load happening and adjust the engine. And the carburetor, for any of you who don't know, that we're talking about is supposed to, I'm just going to say, it's the miracle carburetor that's supposed to make any car, without any other modification, get hundreds of miles to the gallon or a major improvement. And the person who created it didn't do a simple test. Put a stock carburetor, or maybe one optimized by a real mechanic for long-range efficiency. You can make the car work for performance, efficiency, or something in the middle. Set up a car like that and do an honest test where you take everything out of the vehicle. Make it as light as possible. Let's do this where there's a large number at the end of miles per gallon, so that any variation will show up. Do 3 runs with it stripped down and just having the bare minimum in it. The original claim by Charles Nelson Pogue about his carburetors, you could put it on right after doing all that, put in the same amount of fuel, and get a major improvement in mileage. Now, you may have noticed I just explained a baseline test. I make it to where nobody can cheat. All you're changing is the carburetor. Is that the claim? And then suddenly, well, we can't just change the carburetor because I have to tune it first, okay? And then will it work at all for the other carburetor? No. And again, the original claim is you just slap the carburetor on and it works fine. And now suddenly there's a whole process. Every time you remove the wiggle room, they squirm more. Charles Nelson Pogue's claim that he made a carburetor that could do whatever he claimed is not relevant and has been debunked by him because he refused to prove his claim. This is something that doesn't go away. Everybody then whatabouts it. But anyway, my statement in my video was a variation of this. I shouldn't say it was exactly the same or that he got money out of it. He did get money out of it, but I can't prove it. He was paid royalties or licensing for using his patent directly in a product that cited it, and it was used on, as far as I know, some foreign main generator, and I think it was a Honda. Anyway, by the time he died, he was penniless. He wasn't murdered. Somebody made a claim he was murdered. He wasn't, and that person hasn't responded to this. And the person also made a claim that Nikola Tesla was killed for his inventions that threatened the status quo, when in fact he died penniless, just like Pogue did. Now let's get on to the next step. How do you test this? Well, you do a A to B test. When I tested speakers that were controlled by the evil companies selling audiophile speakers, I'd put literally crap-grade speakers right next to the good ones with some isolating foam around them and do A-B tests, and no audiophile could tell the difference between a shitty set of speakers and the really good ones. It didn't matter whether they were good or not. The audiophiles were lying. It had to be expensive and complicated. Meanwhile, if I make a 12-gauge shotgun out of a couple of pieces of pipe and get exactly the same patterning you did out of a $500 shotgun, I'm the one who only spent $5, and I win. Let's move on. Capacitor and battery bank to moderate the load on the electric cars. Yeah, they're called hybrids, but we have variations of it. Yes, there are people on YouTube you can watch doing this, and one or two of them are using vaporizing carburetors because they give a steady, very high efficiency charge, which makes batteries happy, but they dump it to a capacitor array, and the capacitors fill up, like, let's say, four of them, and then they stack themselves in a certain order by switching to charge the batteries. And then the batteries run the motors, and they charge one bank, and then the other one's working. And they use the braking force to charge up the batteries as well. Some people are experimenting with that because if you shuck and jive it enough, and you can do that with electronics and relays and shit, you get very high efficiencies, higher than 200 miles to the gallon. Already it's better than Charles Nelson Pogue, who, again, never proved what he said, so I don't have to debunk it. If the person making the claim won't prove their claim, the claim is invalid. And people hate it when I say that because that's completely logical, rational, and true. But yes, thank you for commenting on that. I didn't mention that, but yeah, it's a combination of capacitors and batteries, specifically a type of battery that can act like a capacitor, just like you said. So thank you for filling that up, and I'm going to probably pin your comment because I forgot to say it. Now, from the same person who made the claim that Nikola Tesla and Charles Nelson Pogue were murdered and it's all a conspiracy and made a bunch of claims and won't address that they are not true or make a video on it. Here we go. This is a channel that has a video called, that doesn't say this, but it says it on screen, Currency is Fake Money. Even though it works exactly the same way and you're splitting hairs and no one gives a shit. Lots of laws were written in Latin. That doesn't mean we're Greeks. Or Romans, or, Spaniards. Anyway, let's move on. Romance languages done in the courtroom. So let's move on. As far as using the fume method, I have used it on an old lawnmower and it works. It works as a vague statement. Lawnmowers don't get miles to the gallon. If it's a riding lawnmower, that's probably the worst test on earth, but you can do it the same way. Strip the thing down, use it exclusively as a go-kart, and use it in stock mode, and get a real mechanic to confirm that you haven't diddled with it to try to lower its efficiency, and write it for miles per gallon rating in a circle or on a circular track or something under controlled conditions with skeptics only watching, not people who are true believers. You can't have your cult. And then go around in circles until the thing runs out of fuel at 1 gallon. See how many miles it is. Now put on your fume-based carburetor and show that it gets better gas mileage. And it should, because you can just put it at whatever speed you optimize the design for. It has to be custom to it and show that it works. Okay? Now do it with a car stripped down to do the same thing with full functionality of being able to go around the circle, make it a big track, a 1 miler, half mile, or quarter mile, something big enough to do the job. Go around it at each speed. 5 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour. 1 gallon. each time, 3 tests. Show that it has a power band or not in a normal car. Most cars are optimized for 55, 65, or 75 miles an hour. Some old cars do not get good max mileage unless you floor it. Some of you might be old enough to know that the engines had to be optimized. The power band had to be optimized for efficiency at a certain rate for highway mileage. That way they get great mileage. You see, car makers want good mileage. Oil companies don't. Why did Pogue say it was the automakers? Because that's the wrong thing to say. He made a mistake. After you do this experiment with like stock equipment, then put on your super carburetor that has one rule. Normal people don't get under the hood and alter everything. Put the knobs in the car, if you have one, highway, speed check, and then go prove it works. Not a lawnmower that doesn't have a miles per gallon rating. Period, full stop. You can build a go-kart and do the same thing. It is an identical test. And yes, if you maintain a certain speed and optimize it for that speed, just like every other car, you'll get better gas mileage. It doesn't have to be Pogue's invention. And by the way, Pogue's invention was this entire complicated mechanism. It was really big. It was bigger than my head. You could build that too. But I'm just asking you to prove that you can do this. Pogue didn't. I'm a hands-on guy. I can see by your channel you are. 2 videos. One of them about how money doesn't really work the way we think it does. You haven't done anything debunking into this because, and then the claim, another claim that the person won't respond to when I say bullshit. The military owns the original of this idea. Yeah, for a static generator or something, there's a dozen patents that Pogue, in some cases, actually acknowledged that came before him. But it was a relatively new item. I mean, it's the 1930s. But you haven't proven your claim, and you haven't got any videos on it. And no citation given, so we can ignore it. You failed to prove your comment. You failed to prove your assertion. You say this is an education channel. It looks like, and this is the person's claim about my channel. My channel is where somebody, don't do research, grammar, takes things from other channels. No, I explore dozens of websites, virtually no videos at all, no channels, makes his own to debunk. You mean I cite my sources and put the information up? It's not channels, it's multiple websites and hundreds of different sources in most cases. The Pogue video has, I don't even know how many links in it. I had to compact them so it would fit in the fucking description. But please do tell me that I'm just stealing from other YouTube channels to debunk things. Meanwhile, on Wikipedia, I get people angry at me for me doing hands-on work by measuring a cartridge and saying you got the dimensions wrong. That's original research. Okay, here's CIP for the European Union. Here's the SAMI designation that proves you're wrong. Here's a bunch of stuff. That's fine. So I'm not allowed to actually just take out a set of calipers and prove that you're wrong about something that anybody, even with a ruler and tape measure, maybe could do this. No, we're not allowed to do that. Wikipedia is a shitbag. But they have a point. If I cite someone else's work, I don't have any vested interest in falsifying it. I can't falsify something that was posted by Pogue. One of the citations I give is his complaints about what was happening to prove that he did nothing but conspiracy theory bullshit. He did not produce anything that worked. Period. Well, he drove a car around and did all this. Yeah, he drove a car around with plenty of room to put extra fuel tanks in, which some people doing the same thing got caught doing. Just because he didn't get caught doesn't change the fact that Pogue refused to prove that he was telling people a fact. Make a video of you trying this method out and I will do the same. How's that? Now we get to the ultimate trolling behavior. Make me do something to disprove something. Charles Nelson Pogue gave up trying to prove it. The point has been lost. Pogue was wrong. Pogue was probably lying. Pogue is dead. If you want to prove his point, again, you have to do the same thing. A vehicle that moves has the ability to change speed by a simple manipulation of a pedal or whatever. Go ahead and test to see what it does under all the conditions and then change out the carburetor to prove the carburetor improves it. In what conditions? I guarantee you it'll have one speed that it works better at and the others are shit. And again, you want to use a lawnmower to prove miles per gallon? Well, I did the same thing, but I stuck it on a go-kart. And it sucked compared to just optimizing it for the load. And I thank the person who brought up the load change and generators question. That was valid. And by the way, again, you can watch YouTube channels where people are optimizing vans to go high range. You just diddle with it until it works. Anybody can invent this stuff. And last again, Charles Nelson Pogue did not release this information openly so people could take advantage of it. He always hid how he did it. He lied. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck.